Okay, we call this talk Financial Basics for Medical Students. All right. Obviously, it's February 15th. Some caveats. Anytime we talk about money, finance, business, anything like that in a medical setting, I think it's important that we go through the caveats here. The first one is that money doesn't bring you happiness. Okay. Uh, that's not entirely true. Up to about $75,000 to $100,000 a year, more income actually does make people happier. But you didn't go into medicine for the money, neither did I. However, if you ignore it, it can make your life really miserable. So, for those who don't know who I am, my name's Jim Dahle. I am an emergency physician. I started the White Coat Investor in 2011 because I got sick of being ripped off. This was back in residency in maybe 2004, 2005. I got sick of being ripped off. I'd been ripped off by everyone I'd ever had an interaction with in the financial world. And so I started learning stuff because I was like, if I don't learn this stuff, I'm just going to keep getting ripped off over and over and over again. Eventually, I started learning it, started teaching it to other docs on internet forums. And after a few years, I was like, nobody knows this. I'm sick of typing the same thing over and over again into the internet. I'm going to start a blog. So in 2011, started the White Coat Investor blog, subsequently added a newsletter, a book, started a forum, then a podcast in 2017, wrote another book. We started doing conferences in 2018 and making online courses. In 2019, started a subreddit. It's really popular among students. You should check that out. We started a Facebook group that's really popular among boomers. You may not want to check that out. We also have a YouTube channel you may want to check out. In 2021 and 2022, I wrote a couple more books. The first of those is the one you should pay most attention to. It's our Guide for Students book. I literally wrote it for you. And the second one's an asset protection book, which I hope you read at some point later in your career. We also started the Milestones to Millionaire podcast in 2021, which I hope you find inspiring and useful. It's kind of a sister podcast to the main White Coat Investor podcast. All right, some disclosures and disclaimers. The website's for profit. Okay, I'm running a for-profit business here. The information, for the most part, like this presentation, is free to you. But we do sell ads on the website. When you go there, you will see advertisements. We actually make money from those advertisements. We have a staff. They like it when we make payroll. Just be advised that we actually make money doing this stuff. But I'm really big on disclosing financial conflicts of interest. So you understand biases, so you understand any sort of conflicts of interest we may have. But if you buy our stuff, you come to our conference, you take an online course, you buy a copy of my book, I actually get paid. I get royalties. But I'm a practicing physician. I'm not a licensed accountant. I'm not an attorney. I'm not a financial advisor. So this is for your entertainment and informational purposes only. You shouldn't take it as personalized accounting, legal, or financial advice. All right, here's what we're going to talk about. We're going to talk about financial literacy, and particularly about financial literacy being a cure for burnout. We're going to talk about living frugally. We're going to talk about specialty choice, which is one of the most important financial decisions that you make during medical or dental school as well. Less so in dental school, but still a lot of people choose different specialties in dental school. Then I'm going to bring Andrew Paulson on from studentloanadvice.com, and he's going to give a presentation about student loan management. This is something that changes like every month, especially in the last year. And so you'll get the most up-to-date information on that. Then we're going to have a brief section about owning versus renting during residency, about avoiding financial catastrophes, and we're going to finish going over the financial steps that you need to be thinking about as you leave medical school. Then we're going to have time to take some Q&A from each of you, and we'll take those, and I think most of them will probably be about student loans, and I'll let Andrew take those. But any other questions, I'll work on answering or finding you the answer for. All right. This first section is on financial literacy. And I put this copy of the book up here to remind me to tell you about the Champions Program. The White Coat Investor Champions Program is basically a big, huge giveaway. We're trying to give a copy of this book to every first-year medical and dental student in the country this year. And we have not yet been successful at doing that. I think we've still got like 80 schools that we don't have a champion at. We can't afford to mail one of these individually to each of you. And so the way we distribute them is we get a champion from each class to pass them out, and then we ship them in bulk. So if you're a first year and you haven't been handed a copy of this book yet this year, that's because your class doesn't have a champion. Okay, so you can volunteer to do that. Sign up right now while you're listening to this, whitecoatinvestor.com/champion. And literally all you got to do is give us your mailing address. We'll send you the books. That's it. That's the whole commitment. It's just to pass them out to your fellow students. And in total, you will probably save hundreds of millions of dollars for your class by doing this over the course of their careers. All right, why is financial literacy important? Well, medical school teaches you the language of medicine, and residency teaches you how to practice it. But neither teaches you a thing about business, personal finance, or investing. And it has a language, just like medicine has a language. That language can be learned. You can hire a financial advisor to teach you. That'll cost you thousands of dollars, but not that much effort. You can take our online course. We call it Fire Your Financial Advisor. You can imagine how much our financial advisor advertisers love that name. It is cheaper than hiring a financial advisor, but does take some more effort. Books are even less expensive, but they require some more effort. You have to read the book and try to understand it. And of course, there are free sources. The White Coat Investor blog and podcast, internet forum, et cetera, is free, but it does require a lot more effort to get that information out. So I encourage everyone to get an initial financial education. I recommend 4 books, one in each category. And here are some examples. These aren't the perfect books, but these are some examples of books that you may want to read. Something on personal finance. And one of my favorites is by Eric Tyson. It's simply titled Personal Finance for Dummies. Goes over all the basics of personal finance. Investing. It's good to read something basic about investing. And the Boglehead's Guide to Investing will give you a broad overview of how to invest. Behavioral finance is really important because you are actually the biggest obstacle to being a successful investor. And I think one of the best books in this respect is How to Think About Money by Jonathan Clements. Another very good one is The Psychology of Money by Morgan Housel. Excellent books. And I think you should read something specific to doctors. Personally, you're a student. I think you ought to read The White Coat Investor's Guide for Students. But the cheapest, easiest, good financial book out there is totally free. It is a free PDF. It's called If You Can. It's by neurologist Bill Bernstein. And you can download it at etf.com/docs/ifyoucan. But if you just Google If You Can PDF, it'll pop right up. And I recommend that if you won't read anything else after this presentation, that you read that. But part of your initial financial education is also putting a written financial plan in place. And it's so important to write that down to remind you later why you have that plan, number one. And number two, the act of physically writing it down exposes the gaps in your knowledge base and encourages you to go get the information you need to fill those gaps. After you have an initial financial education, I recommend you do some continuing financial education each year. And by that, I mean reading one good financial book a year. And then following some sort of financial blog or podcast, read a few posts a month, listen to a few podcasts a month, and that'll keep you up to date on any relevant changes. All right, burnout in medicine is a super common problem. It may not be obvious just how bad it is to a medical student or even to a resident. But by the time you get into your career and start seeing people with totally terrible burnout, you realize this is a huge issue. If you ask doctors, just survey them about burnout, 36 to 50% will tell you that it is having a strong or severe impact on my life. And another 22 to 29% will tell you it has a moderate impact on my life. That's a lot of doctors of all generations. It's not just young ones. It's not just old ones. It's plenty of people in Generation X like me as well. But it's a huge problem in medicine. And it's something worth thinking about from the very beginning of your career. And if you survey people, the top contributors to burnout are bureaucratic tasks. Nobody actually likes charting and paperwork. Spending a lot of hours at work, go figure. And then a lack of respect from administrators is cited by docs in all age groups. The only one that's unique here, of course, is that the boomers can't figure out the EHRs. But, beyond that, burnout is caused primarily by lack of respect from administrators, spending too much time at work, and spending too much time not doctoring, doing paperwork instead of taking care of patients. So this is a really sobering poll. And I think I almost hate to show it to medical students. I don't want to make you cynical from the beginning. But you should be aware of this. When I survey attending physicians, and whether I do it in person, whether I do it on Twitter or Facebook, the answers always look about like this. I ask them if they didn't need any more money. They had $10 million or $20 million. What would they do? Would they keep working just like they are? Would they cut back? Would they totally retire? And these are the results. About a third of people would retire completely. They just punch out. They're done with medicine. They're done with dentistry. They're done. but almost half of them would cut back at work. And less than 10% would say, hey, I'm going to keep working full time. And what that tells me is that there's a lot of docs out there who are working at least partially for the money. They're working more than they would like to be working. Their ideal practice, the ideal vision of their life is not aligned with what they are currently doing. And I think that makes me a little bit sad because that should be a very temporary situation for a doc. No doc should feel like they have to work for money for more than about 5 to 10 years of their career. Quite honestly, you make enough income as a doc that you should be in a financial position that you can cut back relatively quickly during your career if that's what you want. Here are the truths about burnout. Okay. Medicine is a hard profession. You know, there are great days in medicine, and there are days that are like my day today, which sucked. It was a terrible day, right? But it's always going to be hard. You're always going to be dealing with ill people, injured people, people who are worried. You're always going to have to keep up with licensure and credentialing and board certification and those sorts of problems. It's always going to be hard, and that's true. And that contributes to burnout. Ownership helps. When you own your practice, you're a partner or you're a sole practitioner or whatever, you have some say over how your professional life is run, who's hired, who's fired, what your working environment is like. That helps a lot of people with burnout. Now, ownership's not for everybody, but right now, about 2/3 of docs are not owners of their job in any way, shape, or form. They're employees. And employees often don't feel like they have much power. And feeling unempowered is a great way to increase your burnout. There's a high correlation between burnout and depression. If you're depressed, get it identified, get it treated. Okay. Obviously, there's lots of different ways to treat burnout, to treat depression, right? There's medication, there's therapy, etc. It's very common. It's common among docs. If it's depression that's making you burned out, you can treat depression, and that will help your burnout. Burnout is not all the institution's fault, right? You see some people calling it a toxic work environment. And sometimes it is a toxic work environment. You see people calling it moral injury, right? But the truth is that there are both institutional and personal factors. You can put two docs into the same terrible, toxic job, and only one of them might get burned out. And so there's personal factors at work as well. And it doesn't do any good to totally ignore that fact. And I think most docs should work on both of those. Work on the personal side, work on the institutional side, and try to reduce it as best you can. However, the truth is that financial freedom allows for a dramatic number of burnout reducing changes. You can drop the number of shifts you're doing. You can drop the number of clinic hours you're doing. You can see fewer patients per hour. You can work fewer days per week. You can take less call. You can work fewer nights. There's lots of things you can do that will help your work-life balance, that will reduce your burnout, that come from having the financial freedom to say, I don't have to have that terrible job. I don't have to do these things I don't want to do. So my advice to you, throughout your career, as you are making decisions about your career, always be thinking about career longevity. Those things that will allow you to stay in the game, not just for 5 or 10 years, but for 20 years, 25 years, 30 years plus, and enjoy it. So as you make decisions about who you work with, where you work, career longevity, keep that in mind first and foremost, and not pay, not some particular benefit, but where you're going to be able to work the longest. Okay. Now, the truth is, financial planning provides all these tools to beat burnout, right? You no longer have student loans hanging over your head, so you don't feel this, huge monkey on your back. Eventually, you have all your debt paid off. You know exactly what you're worth, and so you don't feel like you're, being taken advantage of by your employer. You can cut back on your call and work days and work weeks. You can leave a toxic job. You can even change careers or retire early if you want to. But the truth is, happiness generally comes from spending time with people that you care about. And so these are all from trips I took last spring, some with my family, some doing fun stuff like going heli skiing or canyoneering in Costa Rica. And if you take care of business early in your career, you will have the financial freedom to live whatever life you dream of living, whatever that might look like. And so I want to encourage you to not ignore finances, to become financially literate and let that help your burnout. Okay. Next thing we should talk about is frugal living. I took this picture a few years ago in Hawaii because I thought it was outrageous to pay $9 a gallon for milk. I think we're all paying $9 a gallon for milk these days. But the point is, the less you spend, the more you have. And as a medical student, the truth is that every dollar you spend is really probably $2 to $3 once you pay it back because of the effects of interest. And so you should spend really carefully. That's because, the time value of money, right? And the effect of higher tax rates as an attendee, right? Money now is worth more than money later, and money grows as it goes along. And then, of course, if you borrow $1,000 at 7%, which I think loans next year are going to be over 7%, and use it to pay rent as an MS1, and you let that interest accrue for 4 years of school, 3 a residency, 3 a fellowship, then you pay it back over 20 years. By the time 30 years have passed, that $1,000 is actually now $7,600. Even if you pay it off within 5 years of coming out of your training, you're going to pay off about $2,700 for that $1,000. So you can see everything's more expensive than you really think it is. And so you ought to really think twice about everything you buy as a medical student. The other thing to keep in mind is higher tax rates, right? You're basically not paying taxes right now. I know it's not popular to say, but the truth is, I didn't pay any taxes as a medical student, or a very minimal amount. It was nowhere near what I pay as an attending physician. Okay. Most people, when they leave residency, they pay more in tax than they earned as a resident. And when you pay back borrowed money, you're doing so with after tax money. So you have to earn the money, pay the taxes, and then use what's left to pay off your student loans. So if you're at a 45% marginal tax rate, which is not unusual for many physicians in moderate to high income tax states, you've actually got to earn $13,000 to $14,000 to pay off that $1,000 that you borrowed as a medical student and drug out for the next 30 years. So, what can you do to avoid taking on all that debt? Well, you can be a poor medical student. This is actually the easiest time to be poor in your life because everybody around you is poor, right? And so it's normal to be poor at this point. Whereas later in life, it will not be normal. Not only will everyone expect you to not be poor, but they will expect you to pay, and everything you're offered will be charged the doctor price. So as a student, now's the time to be poor. Limit how much you eat out. There's lots of free food at the hospital. If you look around, there's lots of presentations, lunch and learns, that sort of thing. Remember that you aren't what you drive. Okay. The truth is that reliable transportation costs about $5,000. It's been a little more expensive the last couple of years. Maybe that figures $7,500 now. But you don't need a $30,000 car to get reliable. You need $30,000 to get nice, but not reliable. If you need to just get to your rotations, get to class, etc., get to the grocery store reliably, you can do that for under $10,000. Now, you can get a beater that'll run for a year for $1,500, but I'm not going to call that reliable transportation. If you're single, you can really cut down on your housing costs by getting roommates. If you're not single and there's somebody else in your life, it would be wonderful if that person can work while you're in school. It's amazing how much less you end up borrowing if your partner is helping pay a lot of those living expenses, and if you're lucky, maybe even some of the costs of schooling. So try to minimize debt by spending less. If you have assistance, if you've got some savings, your uncle's got a 529 for you, or your family is willing to help, use that savings and family help first. So delay taking out your debt at 6, 7, 8%. And by the time the student loan holiday is over this summer, that's what it's going to be at. That debt grows very, very quickly. So delay how long it is until you take it out. Med school loans haven't been subsidized since 2012. And so as soon as you take the loan out, the interest starts accumulating. Okay. You don't have to borrow the whole year's worth of money in August. You can go back in November and you can go back in April and get more money. Okay, from the financial aid office. It takes a week or two to get it, but you can plan ahead a little bit and save a few months of interest. You can work during medical school. I worked during my 4th year. I worked during the summer between my 1st and 2nd year. You can do a little bit of work. I recommend you don't try to do it during your surgery or OBGYN rotation, but you can do a little bit of working during school. And if you have to borrow, always try to get the best terms possible. You generally want to max out your federal loans before taking out any private loans. And you want to consider other sources. If you've got a house for some reason, maybe you can get a home equity loan that'll be a better terms than what you can get with student loans. Maybe you can borrow from a family member. I've even seen a few medical students, and be careful with this if you choose to do this, but they get 0% credit cards. And they put all their expenses on the credit card. And when the 0% period runs out after 12 to 15 months, then they take out the student loan and pay off the credit card. And so they were able to delay that interest for another year. And that helps save money. All right, let's talk about specialty choice. And, obviously I'm on one of the crazy specialties according to this graph. You may end up somewhere else on the chart. Obviously, this is tongue in cheek. Don't take offense from it. All right, here's the truth about medicine and money. Okay. How much you get paid does not depend on how much you know. It does not depend on how long you train. It does not depend on how unpleasant your work is. Market forces do not work very well in medicine. It is not a very functional market economy for lots of different reasons. As a general rule, procedures pay better than thinking in medicine. And a lot of people talk like there was this golden age of medicine, and it was always 5 years before that person got into medicine, right? But the truth is that each year doctors get paid more on average. Now, not every doctor gets paid more. Some get paid a lot more, some get paid less. But in general, salaries go up. The average doctor income in 2011 was $200,000. Last year it was $339,000. Okay. Medicine is not some terrible, terrible profession that's going to hell in a handbasket. All right. People are still making money in medicine. They're able to have very nice financial lives. They're able to pay off their student loans. Okay. So be aware of that when you come out of your residency, when you come out of your fellowship, if you've done well and, completed everything in good standing, you're going to be able to make a lot of money. All right. So part of the message I want you to get tonight is that you need to quit worrying about money. If you're spending a whole bunch of time worrying about it, yes, you need to live frugally during medical school, but this is going to work out. Okay. You are going to be able to get rid of those student loans. You are going to be able to have a nice life down the road. Okay. Do you have to do some things to get there? Yes, but this is very much possible. And if you've been feeling like it's all doomsday, it absolutely is not. Okay. But some specialties do pay better than others. And I'm amazed how many attending physicians I meet that did not know what their specialty made before choosing that residency. And I don't think you should choose a specialty for money. If you go and look at this chart and say, well, plastics, orthopedics, and cardiology pay the most, I'm going to do one of those, you're doing it all wrong. But you should at least have some idea where your chosen specialty stacks up in the house of medicine when it comes to incomes, right? This has been pretty constant for the last 20, 30, 40, 50 years, right? If you're an ID, if you're an endocrinologist, if you're a PM&R, if you're preventive medicine, your salaries tend to be lower on average than if you're in orthopedics or GI or urology or ENT. Those tend to be on the higher end of medicine. And stuff like my specialty of emergency medicine or pulmonology or general surgery all tends to be in the middle somewhere. But this is what nobody ever tells you. You're not going to make that average. And the variation around that average is huge. It's unbelievably wide. I know docs making 5 figures, some of which are working almost full time. And I know docs making 7 figures, and they're in the same specialties. Okay. Psychiatrists and family practitioners, right? Supposed to be at the low end of medicine. I know individuals who are making 7 figures in both of those specialties. Okay. So keep that in mind. You do not have to choose a specialty for pay, but you do have to choose how you design your job later and which jobs you take if pay matters significantly to you. I don't know why my slides aren't working. I got to click on them twice. And it's interesting. I have medical students over to the house every now and then. We have a nice dinner, talk about, emergency medicine. And I tell them this. I tell them if you can't live on $200,000 a year, you have a spending problem, not an earning problem. And they all laugh because it's so obviously true, right? If I use that joke with a group of attending physicians, they don't think that's funny at all because they're like, "Oh, I'm having a lot of trouble living on 200,000 or 300,000 or $400,000." It's true that if you make more money, it's easier to pay off debt. It's easier to build wealth. It's easier to give to charity. It's easier to buy nice, expensive Teslas and boats and whatever if your income's higher. And it is true that you're going to care more about your income and lifestyle 10 years out of residency than you will as an MS3 choosing a specialty. There's no doubt about it. Most of us probably didn't put enough input into income and lifestyles. Maybe we should have when choosing a specialty. Most important factor, bar none, way more important than lifestyle, way more important than pay, is that you choose something you will love doing for a long time. Even just speaking financially, you are better off as a pediatrician for 30 years than spending an extra 3 years training to be a critical care doc and burning out in 10. Okay. Everything works better when you work longer. You have more time to accumulate Social Security, more time for your to save up a nest egg, more time for your investments to grow on their own. You pay less tax because you're making less money over time. Everything works out better if you can work longer. But if you love two specialties completely equally, do yourself a favor and choose the one that pays more and has a better lifestyle. All right. I'm going to turn some time over to Andrew to talk about student loan management.
All right. Thanks, Jim. So I'm just going to go back to the beginning here. So just a quick intro on me. My name's Andrew Paulson. I have a master's degree in accounting, and I'm a certified student loan professional. I'm the co-founder and lead student loan consultant at studentloanadvice.com. And I've been able to advise on over $250 million of student loan debt for doctors, dentists, and other high earners across the country. And I initially came into doing this business after I had experienced firsthand student loans after my wife had finished nursing school. We were trying to figure out repayment programs, loan forgiveness options, and it was pretty darn tough early on. So I'm pleased to partner with the White Coat Investor to offer the organization that is studentloanadvice.com. So what do? We do one-on-one consultations with you where we sit down with you for an hour virtually and we go over what are your options. We create a customized student loan plan for you. We answer all your student loan questions. And then after the call, you get 12 months of email follow-up for additional questions and follow-up. And on average, clients will save close to $200,000 on their student loans. So, and that's because we meet with doctors and dentists and other professionals out there that owe a lot of money, 300, 400, 500,000. I've seen in the $1 million range for one particular situation. So seen a little bit of everything there. So today what we're going to be talking about is a bit of student loans 101. We're going to go into how do you actually manage your loans when you're a new grad, a resident, fellow, or just an early career dentist. And then last of all, we're going to get into how do I make a plan? Okay, so let's talk about how much do you owe in student loan debt? Well, it's probably $200,000 or $300,000, right? And this was as of 2020. And I know that number has gone up a little bit here recently. So MDs, DOs, dentists out there, right? You're going to be coming out typically with a pretty significant amount of money in student loan debt. And it's significantly more than your peers that graduated in the 90s and the early 2000s and even the 2010s, right? It's gone up pretty significantly, the numbers that you have to borrow to go to school. And another thing, that I would highlight is when you're borrowing loans from the government or you're getting federal student loans, the interest rates are usually fixed. And so with rates going up right now, if you are in your second year, then the rates that you borrowed in your first year, those don't go up, right? But as you continue to borrow, rates will probably fluctuate while you're still in school. Okay, so talking a bit about federal student loans, this is the most common form of borrowing for student loans. And as Dr. Dahle talked about, it's probably the way you should start if you don't have any other, 529 money or sources from family, or you have a significant other that's able to help pay your way as well. Interest rates are anywhere from 3 to 9% typically. And usually what you receive when you ask your financial aid office for federal student loans is they offer you direct federal student loans. There was an older loan program that was discontinued before 2010, which was called this FFEO program, but none of you right now are really going to have to worry about that most likely. And they, as of 2012, all these loans are unsubsidized. So that means that they're growing while you're in school. But ... we know that we're in this pause, and the pause has been around since March 2020. Looks like it's going to be expiring here later this year. So a couple of federal protections. There's four key ones that I want to talk about. We're going to get into repayment programs and how to think about that here a little later on. And we're also going to get into some of the loan forgiveness programs that you need to be aware of. But another point here is forbearance and deferment. So this is a point in time where perhaps you cannot make payments, or you're in school and you're not able to, make a significant payment. Your loans are probably in school deferment right now. When you get out of school and you're now making payments, or perhaps you're trying to figure out if you can, please don't go into forbearance. If you have one takeaway on this student loan stuff, just learn about that. That's usually the worst thing that you can do on your student loans, where you can't make payments. And I know that sometimes there's situations that you have to. Okay. Also, there's death and disability discharge. So if you die or you become totally and permanently disabled while you still have your federal student loans, they will be discharged tax free. And your partner doesn't assume them. Your family doesn't assume them. They just go away altogether. Okay. Something that you should be keeping your eye on when you're getting close to when you graduate, look into a direct federal consolidation. What that allows you to do is move into repayment, most likely in July, June, right when you get started as an intern or as an associate dentist. Okay. So let's get into some of the federal repayment programs. And there are what I call more fixed monthly payment or kind of amortized options, where it's a 10-year plan, which is usually called the standard. And there's also the extended repayment program that is over 25 years. They also have this graduated kind of flavor where payments will increase every 2 years. So they'll start out lower and then they'll tier up every 2 years. And there's a 10-year graduated, and there's also a 25-year graduated repayment program. But where an area that we're going to spend a little more time on is income-driven repayment programs. Okay. There's 4 of them. And this is going to sound a little bit like alphabet soup, but you've got ICR, IBR, pay, and repay. The 2 that you really want to keep an eye on and learn about is called revised pay as you earn, repay, and pay as you earn, pay. Okay. And I would encourage you that as you, go through school and you graduate, learn about these programs, learn about the nuances to them, because if you have significant student loans, you're going to want to become an expert in them. Okay. So getting into a bit of income driven repayment plans. So payments have basically nothing to do with the interest rate, almost nothing to do with the debt size. Payments in an income driven plan or IDR plan, they're based on your income and your household size. That's it. So even if you owe $1 million or you owe $200,000, it's based on what you're making, right? So when you're making money as a trainee versus making money as an attending physician, that would, bode to be a huge difference in what those payments would be. So here's a quick example of a resident physician. They're making $60,000 and they have a student loan balance of $300,000 at 7% interest rate. So what would their payments be on the standard 10-year plan? $3,500. I'll tell you what, that's probably going to be more than you're making your paychecks when you're in your resident year, right? Or pretty darn close to what your take home pay is. That's going to be hard to afford unless you have a big side income. Okay. There's also the extended 25-year plan. That's about $2,100 a month. Still a pretty significant chunk of change. So then let's look at the first line there when we're looking at a household of one, or you're single, and the income driven plans have, you can see ICR 774, IBR is about $500, but then you can see the pay and the repay program where these payments are a little bit more affordable. And then you can see as the household size grows, those payments start to get lower for the income driven plans, whereas the standard and the extended will continue as they're more of a fixed monthly payment. So a big thing to keep in mind when you're selecting repayment programs is what the monthly payments will be. Okay, let's get into some of the loan forgiveness programs. We'll focus on the public service loan forgiveness plan because I see a lot of doctors and dentists that are pursuing this program. There's also a taxable income driven forgiveness that's over 20 to 25 years. There's a variety of loan repayment assistance programs. You can, the military offers some loan repayment assistance. There's the National Institutes of Health, National Health Services Corp. The VA even has one. There's more out there, but these are some of the big ones that I see out there. And you can mix and match these sometimes too. So just keep in mind that, I see physicians that are doing public service loan forgiveness and they're working for the VA, right? So something to keep in mind as you're trying to figure out how to pay down your loans. So getting into the public service loan forgiveness program, or PSLF plan. This has been around for about 15 years. And as of November of last year, there's about 365,000 borrowers that have had their loans forgiven through this program. It's a pretty significant chunk of people. Okay. There are 4 requirements, and this program is pretty strict. So if you want to follow it, you got to learn these inside and out. Number 1, you have to be in a qualifying repayment program. We just talked about them. They're the income driven plans. Okay. So if you're on an income driven plan, and you're doing loan forgiveness, you probably want the cheapest one. Okay. Number 2, you have to make 120 on-time monthly payments. These are these are cumulative, not consecutive. So you can take time off and you can resume back with this repayment program. Number 3, you need to be working full-time or working part-time at accumulating a minimum of 30 hours per week. And then last of all, you have to be working at a non-for-profit or a 501c3. The actual process to certify or to get credit for this program is through what's called an employment certification form that I would encourage you to do once a year. And this loan forgiveness is tax-free. So after you've fulfilled these requirements for a decade, whatever your loan balance is at that time, whether it's $200,000 or it's $100,000, that goes away federally tax-free. Most residencies and fellowships are 501c3s, and our academic positions are most of those are 501c3s as well. But keep in mind that there are some doctors out there that you're working at a nonprofit hospital or a 501c3, but you're actually getting paid by a private group or some type of private practice. That type of employment usually doesn't qualify. By and large, doesn't qualify. At the end of the day, it's wherever your paycheck is coming from. Okay. And then, VA, military, CHCs, public health, those are all sorts of jobs that qualify. So why do people do this? Why do people do the public service loan forgiveness program? Well, number 1 is it allows you to have low payments in training, and then lower payments typically when you become a attending physician, and usually the amount that you get forgiven is equal to about what you owed when you graduate medical or dental school. And the last reason there is you typically would pay less to the public service loan forgiveness program over some other alternative repayment plan. And there on the left is just a little bit of some of the numbers there that, as of September 2019, there's only a couple thousand people that had their loans forgiven, but there's only about 100,000 people, 130,000 that were actually trying for this. And we've seen a big, huge kind of influx of applicants and also success with this program. And there's been some recent changes that have particularly been kind of a catalyst that has improved that. But I would assume that as this information about the loan forgiveness program becomes more available, that we'll start to see, continue to see more borrowers that are receiving this loan forgiveness. Okay, let's talk about private student loans. They're not as commonly used to finance education. They're more commonly used after you have finished school and you're trying to, you've decided that you don't want to do public service loan forgiveness or one of those loan forgiveness programs, and you want to move more into this live like a resident or pay down your loans aggressively type of strategy. And the reason why you could do that is typically through refinancing your student loans, you can bring down your interest rate. Let's say you borrowed your student loans are at 8% federally. You can typically bring them down to, a year and a half ago, 2 years ago, people could bring them down to 1% to 2% as when they get out of training. But we're seeing that rates are probably about 5 or 6, give or take, for refinancing. But there's still some value in there to refinance. A little bit more there, less flexible repayment provisions, and for forgiveness options for private student loans. They're less likely to be discharged in the event of death or disability. It's very rare to have private student loans and federal student loans discharged in bankruptcy. Okay. Variable and fixed interest rates. So that means that variable interest rates, if you receive those, they will fluctuate. As rates go up, so could your student loan interest rate, whereas fixed will stay fixed for the life of the loan. Interest rates are anywhere from 0 to 14%, double digits. We see those. Usually fixed monthly payments. And just know that as you get to graduation, you're going to start getting correspondence from a lot of private lenders. Okay. So just a quick idea of if you owe $250,000 in student loans, a 3% interest rate, let's say you're on a 5-year plan, how much would your monthly payment be? It'd be about $4,500 a month. So if we extended it out to 20 years, you'll see that that payment gets a whole lot more affordable. It's only $1,400 a month. Okay. But you do end up paying more in interest over the life of the loan. But this is not the reality if we're looking at the top. If you take a longer term, that the lender is going to require a higher interest rate. So the lower table is a more accurate representation of probably what you get. Maybe it's 6% over a 20-year term. And then you'll see that the cost of the loan goes up. So a little bit of, kind of pros and cons, deciding whether to go down the quicker route or to pay it over a longer time, right? Because you'll probably end up paying a little bit more in interest over a longer loan. Okay, so how do we actually get into deciding how to pay down our loans? There's two big ways that most new grads will pay down their loans. One of those is to just decide to go down a refinance route and pay them off in 5 years or less. The other option is to look into loan forgiveness. But how do you decide which of those is best for you? Debt to income is a big factor here. And if you owe $300,000 in debt and your attending physician income or your practicing dentist income, whatever it may be, is $300,000, that's a debt to income ratio of 1 to 1. Okay. If your income is larger than your student debt, that's usually a recipe to look into just paying them off and not really look into a loan forgiveness program. Now, if you owe more than you make, and for many of you when you're in your early career, that's going to be the case. But even when you're done with your training, if you're still making less than what you owe, that's where you've really got to start considering one of the loan forgiveness tracks. The other factor in there is, what do you want to do? Do you want to be in private practice? Do you see yourself in academia? Do you see yourself in public health? That can have another big factor into deciding how to pay down your student loans. Okay. So here's a quick example of a borrower that owes $400,000 of student loans, and they're looking into PSLF or they're looking to private refinance their student loans. So their income starts out as a trainee at $60,000. Over those 3 years, their income's going to go up about $3,000 a year. And as an attending physician, they start making $250,000. So if we look at the table, the payments, they're on an income-driven plan. In the repay program, those first 2 years, they basically have no monthly payment. Finally, in their third year, it's about $250 a month. And then you'll see that, over time, as their income increases, so would that monthly payment. So when they're an attending physician, they're paying, close to $2,000 a month. Okay. Now, if we looked at a similar situation where they did a 10-year plan, a 10-year refinance, and they were going to make monthly payments, fixed monthly payments, that's a monthly payment of $4,200 a month. I know you probably wouldn't be able to pay that when you're in your first year right out of school, but for simplicity's sake, I just wanted to show you over a 10-year period of time how much you'd pay. The difference in payments, if they did loan forgiveness, they're paying about $100,000 towards their student loans, and the remaining balance goes away tax-free. Whereas if they refinance, they're paying close to $500,000 on this student loans. That's a difference of $400,000. Think about the different things you could utilize with that $400,000. That's a significant chunk of money. So definitely something that you want to consider and at least look into as you're figuring out how to pay down your loans. So how do we create a plan? So number one, set some goals. Retirement, family goals, vacation, sabbatical, whatever you're interested in there. You definitely want to set goals. Number two, take an inventory on your loans. How many federal loans do you have? How many private loans do you have? What are the interest rates? What are the balances, right? And maybe you need to have a little bit of a different approach to each. Then you need to create a budget for how much you can pay on a monthly basis. And I would encourage you, please become an expert in federal student loans if you have them. And if you don't want to do that, get an expert to help you out with it. And then last of all, execute on a plan. So a couple of key takeaways on this section here. Number one is that student loan payoff can be tricky. Number two, federal loans are to be kept federal until you figure out what you want to do. And then last of all is to make a plan.
All right, let me swap these out here. So some people have a really simple student loan plan. They're single, they come out, they do repay while they're in residency, and then the refinances, they leave residency and they pay them off. That sort of person, really simple plan, may not need a lot of help with, their student loan planning. But lots of people have very complicated student loan plans. They're married to somebody else with student loans. They are, going for public service loan forgiveness. They're thinking about going for IDR forgiveness. And those folks really benefit from talking to somebody like Andrew. And those are the people that end up saving these hundreds of thousands of dollars from a student loan consultation. Okay, let's talk now about this burning desire that medical students, and especially their partners, have to own a house as soon as they finish medical school. And I'm not sure where it comes from. I think it is a result of the realtor industry, the mortgage lending industry, whatever it is, but it has convinced so many Americans that the American dream has nothing to do with being successful in your career or building a business. It's about owning a house for some reason. And so people come out with this crazy desire, this burning desire to own a house. And I want you to throw a bucket of cold water on that burning desire. Okay. Owning a house is not the American dream. Okay. Renting is not throwing away money, it is exchanging money for housing. And you do that whether you own the house or whether you rent the house. Okay. Your property taxes, your realty fees, your mortgage interest, that's all throwing away money too. You throw away lots of money when you are, buying a house, owning a house. And if you've never, moved into a house that you own and realized how much stuff has to be changed and how much of a pain it is to get furniture and to get a lawnmower and to take care of all that stuff, it's incredibly expensive. Okay. So keep that in mind. People use this argument that, the mortgage is less than rent, so it must make sense for me to buy. Well, mortgage payments are supposed to be less than rent payments. Think about your landlord, right? What does your landlord do? They're trying to make money. They go buy a place, they rent it out to you. Their only income is the rent payment, but they have all kinds of expenses. They have a mortgage payment, they got to pay property taxes and insurance, they got to pay upkeep, they got to do snow removal and lawn care, and then they want to make profit after the end, right? So, of course, if they're ever going to have a profit left over, the mortgage payment has to be less than rent payments. That's normal. Yeah, that's not a reason to go buy a house. Selling a house for more than you bought it for does not necessarily mean you made money. When you go to buy a house, it typically costs you about 5% of the value of the house to buy and about 10% of the value of the house to sell. So for a $500,000 house, that's a $75,000 transaction cost. If the house does not appreciate $75,000 while you're in it, you're coming out behind. And so I estimate that docs typically make money about a third of the time in a 3-year residency and about half the time in a 5-year residency. That's what you should expect on average. But there are periods of time where you might not make money for 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 years. And there are other periods of time where you can make money in just a year or two buying and selling. But on average, you typically do not make much money in residency. And it's not uncommon to lose money and to be stuck with a rental you don't want when you leave residency. So don't make a mistake because the area you've been in had been in a housing boom the last few years. That may not be the case for the next few years. It's okay to rent during residency. You are not going to become rich as a resident. So don't let the cart get in front of the horse. Okay? Renting allows you to focus on your training. Keep in mind, these realtors will tell you it's a great tax deduction. It's not a tax deduction for you as a resident most of the time because your standard deduction is almost $14,000 a year. It's twice that if you're married. And so you've got to pay more mortgage interest and taxes than that before any of it's deductible because you just get a free $27,000 deduction for doing nothing. You can be living in a rental, $27,000 deduction off your taxes. Okay. And so it's not a huge deduction for most residents. Now, when you're an attendant, you're in a really expensive house, you're paying lots of money in taxes, maybe you're giving a bunch of money to charity, then it generally does make sense, but not in residency, not for tax reasons. You're hardly paying taxes as a resident, quite honestly. Residency graduation is also a difficult time to sell a house. You're going into a high-stress job. You're going to be a brand new attending. Nobody's going to be watching over your shoulder. And it's a difficult time to sell. You got to get over to that new job, and all of a sudden you got to sell this old house, and you're trying to buy a new house. It's just a messy time. It's way easier to just end your rental contract and walk into your new life. Okay, let's talk now about financial catastrophes. Here's a picture of me in Costa Rica trying to make sure I don't have a repelling catastrophe. But we're not going to talk about that. We're going to talk about financial catastrophes. So here are 7 financial catastrophes that keep doctors from building wealth. The first one, surprisingly common, is living hand to mouth. Second one, divorce. Third one, inadequate insurance. The fourth one, too much leverage. Fifth is a poorly thought out investment plan. Then we're going to talk about investing related costs. We're going to talk about some of the uninsurable risks out there. Okay, this one is living hand to mouth. All right. I put this slide up earlier. This is what doctors reported they made on average in each of these specialties last year. It ranges from $576,000 to $243,000. It's a lot of money, right? I mean, you're a medical student. I know what you make. It's about zero. This is a lot of money. But you know what is really depressing? This. This is what doctors actually report they have. Okay. And remember that wealth is not income. Wealth is what you have. Income is what you make. So if you make $400,000 a year and you spend $400,000 a year, you're no wealthier at the end of the year than you were at the beginning. You can still have a negative net worth or a net worth of zero. And if you ask physicians what their net worth is, the young ones will tell you they do not have much money. Many of them actually have negative net worths. That's not a surprise to me. What is a surprise to me is when I look at docs in their 60s and discover that 24 to 34% of them, after 20 or 30 or 40 years of physician level incomes, still are not millionaires. They may have made 5, 6, 7, 8, $10 million during their career, and they don't have $1 million left to show for it. And I think that's a real tragedy. And so we work very hard at the White Coat Investor to help you ensure that does not happen to you. How does it happen? Well, mostly it happens from living hand to mouth. And this is from this year's Medscape survey on physicians' financial habits. And when they asked them, do you live within your means? What do you live? Above your means, below your means? What? 5% of docs said they live above their means. That means they're spending more than they make. 48%, basically half of them, said, I'm spending everything I make. I live at my means. Half of doctors are living hand to mouth or worse. And about half say, I live below my means. I'm saving something. Okay. This is a major problem. This is why doctors do not build wealth very well, because many of them are spending it all. They're literally spending all their money. Okay. Problem number 2 is divorce. And this is actually pretty good news. You know, there's this reputation out there that doctors have these super high divorce rates. That's not true. The average American divorces about 45% of the time. If one of you is a doc, that drops dramatically to about 25%. If both of you are docs, it's only about 10%. So you actually have better odds than the average American, but it's still a huge financial catastrophe because divorce cuts your assets and your income in half. And so I joke a lot with people and tell them that date night is their best asset protection technique. You are far more likely to lose your money to your partner than you are to your patient. All right, here's another one, inadequate insurance. Okay. There are financial catastrophes out there that you should insure against. Dropping your iPhone in the toilet is not one of them. Okay. Disability, major problem if you become disabled before you become financially independent. And this happens all the time. Statistics are as much as 1 out of 7 docs will go on disability at some point during their career. And you can insure against that by buying disability insurance. It's not that cheap because it gets used. So most people that shop for it kind of get sticker shock. They're surprised how much it costs, which is typically 2 to 6% of the income that you're protecting. So if you're trying to protect the income of $10,000 a month, that'll cost you $200 to $600 a month to protect that. Yeah, it's not insignificant. It's a big chunk of change, but it sure beats being disabled and having to try to get Social Security to pay you something on disability, which is much harder than to collect on a disability insurance payment. If someone else depends on you, your death is a huge financial catastrophe to them. And you can insure against this by buying term life insurance. Don't make the mistake I did when a college buddy came by and sold me whole life insurance as a medical student. You don't need whole life insurance. You probably never will. But you do need term life insurance. If you have a spouse that depends on you, if you have kids that depend on you, get some term life insurance, get a whole bunch of it. Injury and illness can be a financial catastrophe. You can protect against those with health insurance. Liability is a financial catastrophe. Until you've gotten a letter that says, give me $5 million, your negligence caused my brother or my son or my dad to die, you maybe haven't thought about your liability so much. But you do have liability in medicine, and you should buy malpractice insurance to protect against it. You should also buy umbrella insurance. This is personal liability insurance, and it helps protect you from things that happen outside of work. Somebody slips and falls at your rental property or on the sidewalk in front of your house, or more likely, your 17-year-old teenage driver hurts somebody in a car wreck. This is what helps protect you. The good news, it's way cheaper than malpractice insurance, so you should definitely have that. If you lose expensive items like your home burns to the ground, right? That's a financial catastrophe. You can insure against that with property insurance. Not having these insurances lead to financial catastrophes among doctors all the time. Okay, here's another financial catastrophe. Too much debt in your life. If you have too much leverage, you can get into trouble. Now, the math shows that if you can borrow at 2% and invest at 10%, that's a winning strategy, and it is most of the time. But the truth is that 10% is never guaranteed, and occasionally those investments that make that sort of money have severe downturns. And if you cannot make the debt payments when those downturns occur, you're going to get into trouble. Real estate investing tends to be particularly susceptible. And in those nasty downturns, cash is your king. And having cash and cash flow can allow you to weather downturns. When you're investing in real estate, the way you ensure you have cash flow is by putting more money down, having less leverage. And if you look at the professionals, they'll put down about a third of the value of a property, and that protects them in a real estate downturn. It ensures that they have the cash flow to be able to wait, and they don't have to fire sale that property to make the payments or avoid being foreclosed on. Hey, here's another one, a poorly thought out investing plan. Some investors don't take enough risk. The majority of your portfolio should not be in bonds and CDs and whole life insurance. It should be in things with high returns like stocks and real estate. Even though they're more volatile, even though there's more risk of loss, you just need your money to grow faster. You need it to do some of the heavy lifting to build a nest egg for you for retirement. So not taking enough risk is a problem. You need to make sure you're taking enough. Market timing, not marketing timing, but market timing, is a poorly thought out investing plan. It's a financial risk. You might think you can predict the future. You can't. Your crystal ball doesn't work any better than mine or anybody else's. If you think you can predict the future, I suggest you start keeping a journal and write down what you expect to happen with stocks or bonds or real estate this year or interest rates or whatever, and write it down. You'd be surprised when you go back and look in a year or two how crummy you are at predicting the future. And it will likely cure you of any desire to try to time the market. Same thing with stock picking. You don't know which stocks are going to do better than others. So avoid that uncompensated risk and just buy them all by using index funds. Another problem is lack of diversification. I have met far too many people who lost all of their money in their small business, in their single farm, by putting it all in Tesla. By just not diversifying. Diversifying is like the first rule of investing. Don't put all your eggs in one basket. This is a long-term game. It is not about trying to make it all at once. You don't need to get rich quick. You've already gotten into medical school or dental school. You are going to get rich if you just do some boring investing stuff and carve out a significant chunk of your income to invest. You don't have to go crazy on anything. And if you have this gambling itch, if you must buy some speculative assets as part of your investment portfolio, maybe it's Bitcoin or Ethereum or who knows what crypto assets, some NFT. Maybe it's precious metals like gold or silver or platinum. Maybe it's a piece of land out in the boondocks. Limit that investment to a single-digit percentage of your portfolio. So if it goes bad, like some of those investments have in the last year, it doesn't sink the whole plan. Here's another one This happens to doctors all the time. They don't pay attention to their investment costs. That includes advisory costs, that includes expense ratios on mutual funds, it includes commissions, all those costs. If you are paying just 2.5% a year, right? It seems like this tiny number. But if you're paying just 2.5% a year in investment costs over the course of your career, 60% or more of your earnings, the money your money made, is going to go to the financial services industry. That tiny little number becomes a huge number when you compound it over 30 years. You need to watch those costs and get them down, down, down as far as you can. Now, if you need advice, it's okay to pay for advice, but make sure you're getting good advice at a fair price. And remember that the more you can learn to do yourself, the better. In fact, managing your own investments, becoming your own financial planner might be the best paid hobby out there. And your investments do not have to be expensive. Low cost, broadly diversified index mutual funds work just fine. Okay, now there's some uninsurable risks out there besides divorce that we talked about. Burnout, you can't insure against it. So you need to work throughout your career to take those steps that promote career longevity. Fraud, if you commit fraud, you can't insure against that. Sexual misconduct or harassment, many doctors have lost their ability to earn money due to making a mistake like that. You can't insure against it. Altering medical records, malpractice doesn't cover that. And criminal acts and drug and alcohol use, you can't buy insurance against that stuff. Okay. That can really affect your income dramatically. Be very careful throughout your career to not fall into any of those problems. Okay. Now we're in our last section. After this, we're going to do questions. So type your questions in. You can type them right in wherever you're watching, Facebook, YouTube, whatever it is. You can type them right in. They'll come to us, and Andrew and I will answer your questions after this section. Okay, so we talked about student loans. Okay, if you got private student loans, refinance them as soon as you can, right? They're not going to be forgiven. You're going to have to pay them back. You can get student loan payments as low as $100 a month on private loans during residency and fellowship. Make sure you enroll in an IDR program, not forbearance. You start making payments as soon as possible. If you're single or you're in a single earner household, repay is your plan. Okay, if you are in a dual earner household, you probably ought to hire Andrew at studentloanadvice.com and talk about all the different options you have to manage your student loans, both during residency and fellowship and afterwards. Some people go into repay, some people go into pay, some people file their taxes married filing jointly, some file them married filing separately. It really does matter when you get into a complicated student loan situation. Okay, insurance. As soon as you come out of medical or dental school, get yourself some disability insurance. Protect that most valuable asset. We've got a list of disability insurance agents you can trust on the website at whitecoatinvestor.com under the recommended tab. But you need own occupation, specialty specific insurance. Your residency program may offer it. That's probably a group plan. It's probably not as good as what you can get as an individual. But you should consider, even if your residency program gives you something, you should consider buying individual or a portable disability insurance policy either during or as you leave residency. You generally want to buy as much as they'll sell you. You probably can't afford as much as you need as a resident, but try to get yourself at least a $5,000 monthly benefit. So if you're disabled as a resident, at least you'll have the average American income to live on the rest of your career. Okay, if anyone else depends on your income, you also need to buy term life insurance. And by the time you're an attending, that ought to be a seven-figure amount, $1 to $5 million. It's cheap. It's much cheaper than disability insurance. It's much cheaper than, malpractice insurance. Typically, you can get about $1 million for $600 or $700 a year. Don't buy whole life insurance. I already mentioned that once, but it ought to be repeated ad nauseum. Too many doctors end up buying that, and about 75% of those who buy it regret it. Get yourself an umbrella policy. It's inexpensive. A few $100s a year will get you $1 million policy. You just stack it on top of your auto insurance, on top of your homeowner's insurance or renter's insurance. Same company usually provides it. Okay, learn to live on less than you make. Make a budget, prioritizing your values, right? A budget is all about making your money go where you care most about, right? Some people that's travel, some people that's eating out, some people that's, they're a car person. They really want a nice car. You can do whatever you want within reason, less so as a resident, more so as an attending, but you can't do everything. So learn to live on your income. A resident makes the average household salary in America. Half of America is living off less than what you make as a resident. If you can't do it, how is anybody else going to do it? So learn to live on that income and start saving something. If your residency program hospital offers a match, make sure you get it. That's like leaving your salary on the table to not put enough into your 401k or 403b to get that match. And as a general rule, during your training years, you want to use Roth accounts. These are tax-free accounts. Sometimes if you're trying to maximize how much you get forgiven under public service loan forgiveness, you might want to use a tax-deferred account. But as a general rule, Roth is for residents. Hey, do you need an advisor? Well, 80% of docs want and probably need an advisor. It's perfectly okay to use one. Just make sure you're getting good advice at a fair price. Good advice for a comprehensive financial planner and investment manager is a four-figure amount per year. That's what it costs. You're not going to get it for $200. You're not going to get it for free. If that person is telling you they're free, they're charging you commissions and it's all hidden under the table. Okay, it's going to cost you a few $1,000s. So it's okay to do your own. It saves you a bunch of money, obviously. It might be the best paying hobby out there. But if you're going to do it on your own, you actually have to do it right. You got to pay some attention. It helps if you enjoy this stuff. Okay. We talked about student loan advice. If you need a one-time consultation about your student loans, you can also do that for the rest of your financial plan with some financial advisors. You can just check in with them, once a year or every couple of years, make sure you're still on track. You don't have to hire a full service financial advisor and pay those thousands of dollars a year. But you need a simple investing plan. Okay. Here's one that will at least get you through your training. Use Roth accounts, whether that's a Roth IRA or Roth 401k or 403b. Put everything into a life cycle or target retirement fund. These are broadly diversified index funds. They're very low cost. They will automatically rebalance. They're truly set it and forget it investments. The honest truth is when you're a resident, your mix of investments doesn't even matter that much. That's your asset allocation. What matters is how much money you're putting in there. And that especially matters as you come out of residency, become an attending. It's really key to focus on your savings rate and how much money is going toward your investments in the beginning. Later, that investment return will matter more. Your mix of investments will matter more. Early on, it's really all about what you're saving. But don't mistake investing for gambling, right? If you're putting a bunch of money into crypto and Tesla and ARK funds and you're on Robinhood and you're following Wall Street bets, that's probably not going to end very well for you. These were all the cool things about a year ago. Now none of them are cool, right? Why aren't they cool anymore? Because they all lost 75% of their value. And so that happens when you mistake gambling for investing. Okay, here's what we talked about today. You need to become financially literate. It's your second job. Okay, you are going to be asked to be a pension fund manager in this 401k world. So you've got to learn this stuff. If you don't, you're going to wake up halfway through your career or worse, toward the end of your career and go, I should have learned this stuff. Well, yeah, you should have. Here's your chance to learn it now. It's all in that book, The White Coat Investor's Guide for Students. And it will walk you through this stuff. You can become financially literate. It's way easier than learning medicine or dentistry or whatever your profession might be. As a student, assume everything you're buying now actually costs 3 times what you're paying, because by the time you pay it back, that's probably about what you will have paid for it. Consider your cost of living carefully when choosing your residency. Okay, it matters where you go to residency. It's a lot harder to live in New York than it is in Indianapolis. Obviously, you want to put the people you're going to be working with first, but you want to also be getting good training. But the next thing is location after that. It needs to be a place you enjoy, but keep in mind the cost does matter. Choose your specialty carefully. Choose something you can do for a long time that you really, truly love. But if you love 2 things equally, pick the one that pays the most and has the best lifestyle. Have a written plan for managing your student loans. Rent a home during residency as the default choice. Now, if you're going to be there for medical school and residency, or you're going to be in, a 5-year residency, and you can't find anything reasonable to rent, maybe you can buy and still be okay. But most of the time, you ought to be renting during residency. And when you come out of residency, have a solid financial plan so you hit the ground running as you receive that first paycheck, and that you can be financially successful throughout your career. Okay, we're going to move now into the Q&A portion of this. So let me bring Andrew back over here. We're going to try to share this microphone here. It's going to be a little bit tricky, I think, but that's due to the technical difficulties we ran in here before. All right, we have a few comments about interest. Absolutely, your interest accumulates during medical school. Okay, let's look at this one here. Is it true that your credit score can decrease if you pay your loans off too early due to not honoring the life of the loan? That sounds like a good question for you, Andrew. I'm going to hand this mic to you.
I think that there is something to be said when you have debt and you're paying on it and you're accumulating credit. I think it's like when you're first starting your credit journey, having a car, maybe a debit card or a credit card when you're starting out. If your parents gave you one of those, that can help you kind of build your credit early on.
Two factors there, I guess, right? I mean, you're getting more debt, but you're also losing an account. So it's probably a wash.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
This one's all yours too.
Why did only 20% of applicants get approved last year? How do you decide to do PSLF when there seems to be no guarantee the program will exist or you'll be approved? Great question. So the first part, the reason why there was only 20% of people that were getting approved was because that number is taking everybody that's applying. It's taking people that are in their first year of applying, in their second year, and what I call years 1 through 9, you're in the accumulation phase. And what they're actually doing is they're certifying their employment. But until you get to the 10 years, you don't qualify. So the trouble with that number is they don't tell us how many people have completed 10 years and they're now waiting to get their loans forgiven. That number isn't shown. It just shows that there's about 1.2, 1.3 million people that are right now that are doing this process. So it's a bit of a garbage in, garbage out number. And I would assume it's much, much higher, the success rate there. And then the second piece, how do you decide? Well, so for those of you that are borrowing right now, I don't see them pulling the rug out from under you if you're interested in the public service loan forgiveness program. If you were going into med school or dental school in 5 years from now, it could be totally different. But as long as you get in while the program is existing, I don't see them retroactively getting rid of it. Okay, here's another one. Is there any downside to PSLF even if your debt to income ratio is low? I would say if you're going to be, if you know you're going to work in a nonprofit or a 501c3, you can definitely look into it. But if you're making $250,000 or $300,000 and you only owe 25 grand, I think it's just better to pay your loans off at that point. Why, deal with the paperwork and a little bit of the legislative stuff that you have to do with PSLF, and I would just pay them off. Okay, and I'll take this one too. Yeah. I decided to take student loans via a private lender because the interest rate is lower than government loans. I am concerned about my ability to make payments during my residency. What options are available to refi and reduce monthly payments while in residency? So, what I would definitely look into is they usually allow you to make partial payments or only about $100 monthly payments while you're in residency with a number of private lenders that we work with all the time. Maybe that's something that your lender already looks for. I would definitely check that out because if you got to make a $3 or a $4 or $5,000 monthly payment, that's going to be a really big bill to pay when that's probably about what your take home pay is as a resident. And secondly, there is if your current lender doesn't provide that, I would look at some other private lenders out there that would.
There's two, I think.
Yeah, Laurel Road, SoFi, those are some of the big ones that we see quite frequently.
Okay.
And lots of student loan ones.
Yeah, good luck on that. This one isn't a student loan one. They want to know when they should get married.
Oh, yeah. And you know what? I actually have a lot of clients that ask me this. They're like, should I get married? And I'm like, that is a totally personal decision, right? And there is some financial ramifications with that. How should how should we plan to get married if we know our partner is also going to have student loans from professional school and law school, for example? Totally personal decision there. If you're going to get married now or in 5 years from now, I don't think the financial ramifications of loans are really going to change things enough to put that off if it's the right decision for you. Let's see. Got some for you, Jim.
Here's the deal in life, right? In life, there are times when you will be penalized for being married. There are times when you will be rewarded for being married. Over the course of your life, that's probably going to even out. So when the time is right for you to get married, if the time is ever right, or the time is right for you to have kids, go ahead and do it. You're a doctor. You're going to have enough money without optimizing every single life decision for finances, and you'll still be okay. Okay. So if you're thinking about getting married, go get married. The finances will work out, I promise, especially if you're marrying a lawyer. A doctor and a lawyer, you're going to do fine with your student loans. You're going to get them taken care of. Okay, here's a really important one. Can you summarize what should be done fourth year of medical school into first year of residency with student loans, aka file taxes to show low income your fourth year, enroll and repay, consolidate, etc.? Yeah, it's pretty straightforward. Do file your taxes as an MS4, right? There's no doubt you should do that. What that does is it shows you don't have any income. And so they use that when you go to show your income. They're like, well, what did your taxes show last year? And you show them you didn't make anything. And all of a sudden now you don't have any payments. It's great. Those payments count. Those $0 payments count that you make as an intern because you didn't make any money as an MS4. So definitely file your taxes, even if you're not required to that fourth year of medical school. That's a great tip. We should have mentioned that in the presentation. Should you enroll and repay? Yes. What some people do to actually speed it up is they consolidate their loans right as they come out of school. And that basically allows them to skip that 6-month grace period. And this matters if you're going for PSLF. This allows you to, get PSLF 6 months sooner than you otherwise would, because you basically skip that grace period. You don't want to skip a grace period where your payments are $0. You want those payments to count, right? And so definitely if you're going for PSLF, consolidate those federal loans, not refinance, remember, consolidate those federal loans and get enrolled usually into repay, but possibly pay. If you're married to another earner, you really got to run the numbers. And if you need help doing that, Andrew can help you do that. And that's about it, I think. As you come out, you want to get some disability insurance too, but that's not a student loan issue. Speaking of which, our next question is on disability insurance. Is it possible to stay with a lower rate disability insurance if you purchase as an MS4? The sooner you purchase disability insurance, the cheaper it is. Now, you probably can't buy a very big policy as an MS4. By the time you're an attending, you're probably going to need a more expensive policy that has a larger, monthly benefit if you get disabled. But you can keep that one you bought as an MS4 as part of your coverage. So the sooner you buy it, generally the better. It's cheaper for men than it is for women. It's just the opposite for life insurance. It's definitely cheaper if you get it before you develop some sort of a medical condition or take up scuba diving or flying or rock climbing or that sort of a thing. Okay, let's take this one from Michael. In regards to Roth conversions done using 401k funds, can I take that money out of my Roth to spend tax and penalty free in medical school? You do have to pay attention to something called a 5-year rule, okay, which basically requires you to, in order to do that, you got to wait 5 years after the conversion. But here's an easier way, right? What I would do during medical school is I actually probably would not raid my retirement accounts. I'd probably just let those ride, even if it meant borrowing a little bit more money. What I would do, though, is do Roth conversions during medical school, right? Because you don't have any income. So now you get to do these free Roth conversions during medical school. And that's pretty awesome to be able to do a free Roth conversion and never have that money taxed again. It wasn't taxed initially because you got a tax deduction when you put it in when you were working before you went to medical school. And now it's going to grow tax free and come out tax free in 30 or 40 years. And that's pretty awesome. All right. Oh, we got to do this one first. Yeah, we're going to put this up as a YouTube video afterwards. So probably not sending the slides around. There are some similar slides you can get if you go to our, what do we call our award we give every year? The Financial Educator Award. On that post, if you go to the Financial Educator on WCI Plus, we have some similar slides that you can download at any time, and please share them with everybody you know. But these slides we won't be uploading. The video itself will be uploaded. Okay, here's another one for you.
Okay. Thanks, Brian. Could you explain the new proposed changes to the repay program, specifically whether the proposal that any leftover interest for the month after payment will be waived is accurate? Thank you. So great question. And just so you know, they are trying to shake up income-driven repayment programs. They're trying to take us from 4 plans to effectively a default 1 plan, the repay program. And so what this is talking about is there is an interest subsidy that exists in the repay program. So let's say that your loans, you're a new resident and the interest on your loans is $1,000 a month. Okay. And let's say that your payment is $500 a month. So that means that every single month, if you're only able to cover a portion of the interest, there's an unpaid amount of interest every single month that's sitting there and it's accumulating in its own bucket. So if you're paying $500 and there's $1,000 of interest, your loan is growing $500 a month. Well, as repay is currently constituted, half of that unpaid interest is waived, or what they call through an interest subsidy. So your loan will only be growing $250 a month. That's a huge reason why a lot of residents, a lot of early career physicians out there are doing the repay program, because it helps keep down the interest on your loan. So what this new proposal is actually trying to do is it's trying to wipe away any unpaid interest. So in the event that you're unable to pay any interest, that interest, or effectively, if you're not able to pay let's say the monthly payment again is $500 and the interest is 1,000, that entire $500 of unpaid interest is totally waived. So what does this mean in the bigger picture of things? This means that as long as you're in training and your payment isn't going to be over the interest, your loan won't grow at all. So a huge thing to take into account. And there's some other stuff in there about the repay program that you should definitely check out. We've written about it on the blog.
All right. I think this next one's for me.
Yep.
Can you comment about what to look out for if you plan to do moonlighting during residency to supplement your income and or help with loan repayment? LLC and having a tail end policy and anything else? Well, here's the deal. If you're going to do some moonlighting during residency, I did a little bit of moonlighting. I think I worked 10 total shifts moonlighting during residency. It was nice to have the money. I think I got paid $80 an hour. I'm sure moonlighting residents make more than that these days. I hope they do. But it was nice. It was nice to have that extra money that last year. I did it all in my last 6 months. You do not need an LLC. Okay. You're not getting anything good out of having an LLC. It's not going to protect you from malpractice. Okay. So don't bother forming an LLC. Just be a sole proprietor. They pay you on a 1099. You'll just file Schedule C for that income, and you'll have to pay some payroll taxes on it, and that's normal. But you might as well get used to that. You'll probably have to deal with that somewhat as an attending anyway. You do need malpractice insurance, and most moonlighting opportunities for residents will cover that malpractice insurance. As you evaluate that opportunity, you need to make sure that somebody is covering your tail. And what I mean by that is there are two types of malpractice insurance. There is occurrence malpractice insurance, and there is claims made malpractice insurance. Under an occurrence policy, if you get sued for something that happens during the period of the policy, when you're working, you're covered, no matter when that claim is made. If you buy a claims made policy, it only covers claims that are made while that policy is in force. If you get a claim a year later or 2 years later or 17 years later for some kid, it doesn't cover that. And somebody has to buy a separate policy to cover that, whether that is a tail policy, basically it covers your tail after you leave, or whether that is a nose policy, with your next job, your next malpractice policy goes back and covers. You need something that covers that. And so if you're only going to be working a few shifts like I did, it better be either the employer is going to buy you a tail or they're offering you an occurrence policy. But those are the main things. Anything else with moonlighting, I guess I'd just be careful not to do it too early during your residency, before you're really prepared to do it. There's a reason you're going to residency. It's to learn how to practice medicine. And if you're out there as a PGY2 moonlighting, you don't know everything about practicing medicine yet. And there's some danger there. So that'd be my main caution with moonlighting. Okay, a few comments. I'm going to skip those and just go to the questions. This one, I think, is a student loan question for Andrew.
Thanks, Shane. My partner is a physical therapist. I got married during residency and am still in repay. Together, we owe $300,000 and will make that together next year. Should I switch to pay? Okay, so it depends. Are you going to do a loan forgiveness program, or are you just trying to pay your loans off aggressively? If you're looking to do loan forgiveness, this is usually where it makes sense to go into pay, because you might be running into what's called a payment cap. Effectively, if you make more than you owe, your payment can get capped in the pay program, whereas in the repay program, there is no payment ceiling. Okay. To make matters even a little more complex, typically we saw a lot of couples that were doing married filing separately because they were able to bring down their income or their monthly payment by excluding their spouse's income. And that was typically another big reason to switch into the pay program. But now, with this currently proposed repay plan, they're also going to allow you to exclude spousal income. But I would assume if you're with a debt size at that level and with your spouse being a physical therapist and you being potentially a doc, I would probably look to get into the pay program.
All right. Our next one is no NP students. Now, obviously, 95% of personal finance applies to everybody. 99% of it applies to all high income professionals. Only about 1% of it's truly doctor specific. There's lots of NPs and PAs and pharmacists and engineers and, in white that are white coat investors. So, are the majority of us doctors? Yes, but not all of us for sure. Okay. Here's an interesting one about a debt payment or about a down payment from Rajiv. And thanks for all of your many comments, Rajiv. I'm not going to put them all up here because most of them were comments, not questions. But this one is, what do you recommend for how much to put down for a down payment when you're debt free? Well, if you're buying investment property, I like to see you put down 25 to 33% to make sure you cash flow. If you're just buying a house, it's nice to put down a 20% down payment. That allows you to get a standard mortgage where there's more competition. You can get better rates, better fees. There's just a lot more options when you put down 20%. But if you've got something better to do with your money, like maxing out retirement accounts or paying off student loans or saving up an emergency fund or whatever, it's okay to use a doctor loan. Doctor loans have down payments that range from usually 0% to 10%. And you still don't have to pay what most people have to pay when they don't put 20% down. And that's PMI, private mortgage insurance. This is the mortgage insurance you buy to protect your lender from you defaulting. It doesn't do you any good. So it's just an expense to you. It's nice to avoid, and you can avoid it by either putting 20% down or using a doctor mortgage if you do not put 20% down. But I'm not too partial. If you've got a better use for your money, go ahead and use a doctor mortgage. You probably won't need it for your second home, but you may get a lot of use out of it for your first home. Okay, here's a question from Mitchell. I'm in OMS 4 on an Indian Health Services scholarship. So you owe time versus money, like me. This is what I did. I had the HPSP scholarship. If my residency doesn't offer a 403B match, or he says in another comment a 457B, should I contribute if the plan expenses are relatively high? Well, if you can, it's great to get in the habit of saving for retirement early. Absolutely. I have never actually had a job that offered a match. I've never had a match my entire life. So obviously I have lots of money in retirement accounts. I put lots of money in retirement accounts. So I obviously believe that even without a match, it's still worth doing. But it kind of sucks when the plan expenses are high. But high expenses that are so high you don't want to use the plan have to be astronomical, like 2% plus a year. And most of them aren't that bad, especially since you're going to be rolling the money out of this plan into another plan in just a few years, right? When you finish residency, this is no big deal. Go ahead and use it. It'll be nice to get the tax advantage. It'll be nice to have the asset protection. You'll be glad you had that money in a retirement account later. So go ahead and put it in there. Okay, what's our next one here? A lot of comments. You guys talking amongst yourselves in the comments section? Okay, here's one on disability insurance. To clarify, the recommendation is to only buy into a better disability insurance plan or to stack yours with the residency programs plan. Yeah, usually. Any disability insurance is better than no disability insurance. Most disabilities, if you have something really terrible happen, any policy is going to pay. But if you get into a gray area, it's low back pain and the MRI doesn't look too bad, you've got some sort of weird, terrible pain in your left hand and you can no longer intubate. Those sorts of things that tend to be a little bit more gray, mental illness issues, those sorts of things. You want the best policy you can have because if you get disabled, you want it to pay and you don't want to spend a bunch of time getting a lawyer to help you make the company pay. And the better policies tend to be the more expensive policies and tend to be the ones that will actually pay you when you get disabled with one of these gray things. So anything's better than nothing. But as a general rule, you want an individual policy for at least part of your coverage, not only because it's more likely to pay, but also because it can be taken with you when you go to another job. And a typical group policy, when you leave your employer, it doesn't go with you. Okay, here's another one from Rocky. He's an MS4 without a match from a residency program. Should I skip the 403B and go straight to a Roth IRA? Yeah, you should. Without a match, the Roth IRA is a little bit better. You can always get lower costs. You have a little more control over it. If you max that out and you still want to save more, that's $6,500 this year. If you want to save more than that as a resident, I'm impressed. But then you can go back to the 403B at that point and probably use the Roth option. The only exception here is if you're trying to get your taxable income down because you're trying to get more of it forgiven as part of your student loan plan. Then you might want to use a traditional IRA or the tax-deferred 403B. Okay, another one from Rocky. You mentioned working in your fourth year. Will this significantly affect keeping your IDR payments low? Well, the more income you have, the higher those IDR payments go. I don't know. How much do you think it affects your payments if you make 10 grand?
No. So good point. If you're single, before they're going to charge you anything, you have to be making at least $20,000, because when the loan servicer is calculating your payment and income-driven repayment, what they do is they actually take out a deduction based on your household size, which is based on a poverty line deduction the government sets. And as a single person, it's about $20,000. If you're married, just the two of you, it's like 25,000, right? So if you made $5,000 and you were working for a test prep company or whatever you were doing, it's not going to change your monthly student loan payments. And even if you did make $30,000, it's like $50 a month what you'd be paying.
Well, you've been with us for over an hour and a half. We appreciate your time tonight. We hope it was valuable to you. Thank you for what you're doing. This is a great career. There will be bad days, but it is a wonderful career. We thank you for doing it. It takes a special person to be, as Dyke Drummond likes to say, a light worker, in these healthcare fields. And so thank you for doing that. If you are an MS1, or if you know the MS1s at your school have not yet gotten a copy of the White Coat Investor's Guide for Students, please encourage one of them to apply at whitecoatinvestor.com/champion. And we'd like to get those out to you. I think the deadline for shipping this year is like March 17th. So we need a champion from your school by March 17th to distribute the books. Otherwise, this will go up on YouTube in a few days so you can catch whatever you might have missed. And we thank you, as always, for your support and telling others about the White Coat Investor and about studentloanadvice.com. Thanks so much for your time today.
The hosts of the White Coat Investor podcast are not licensed accountants, attorneys, or financial advisors. This podcast is free entertainment and information only. It should not be considered professional or personalized financial advice. You should consult the appropriate professional for specific advice relating to your situation.